Welcome to the Stogie Geek Show, episode 98. This episode is sponsored by Mr. J's Havana Smoke Shop, located here in Rhode Island. They have an outstanding selection of premium handmade cigars. And by the Havana Cigar Club, located in Warwick, Rhode Island. It's a great place to enjoy a drink and a cigar. Stogie Geeks listeners can find a $5 off coupon by clicking our website, or clicking on the HCC logo on our website. And by Debonair Cigars. Visit stogiegeeks.com/debonair for a list of retailers who carry Debonair. Buy some today and get a little more debonair. And by Ocean State Cigars. Try the J. Grotto series, including the Connecticut Shade Silk and limited edition J. Grotto Reserva lines. Visit them on the web at oceanstatecigars.com for a list of retailers near you. Welcome, everyone, to this edition of the Stogie Geek Show. Here in the studio to my right is none other than Mark Jr.
That's me.
And who am I for this show?
You will have various and sundry names. For now, you'll be Celine Dion.
Various diva names. Apparently, it was news tonight, shocking that I'm a diva. And everyone knew that already, I thought.
And to my left, we have Celine Dion for the day.
On the lines via Skype, Mr. Will Cooper.
Greetings, everybody.
From a
Tin can, right?
a not non-smoking hotel room, which I didn't even know existed anymore.
I know.
It's
Come on.
awesome.
He must be in, like,
You got to be in the
Mexico or something.
He's checking out those San Andreas wrappers for us on Mexico.
It's
It's market research is what he's doing.
market research, yeah.
We've got on our show tonight. Well, let's talk about. Are our guests smoking what we're smoking as well? Are they part of this whole Lancero
So
smoking?
I told them, yep, I told
Okay.
them, I gave them the choice on that.
Okay, so our guests tonight are Kip and Craig from Half Ashed. Welcome, Kip and Craig.
Thank you.
Hello,
Thank you guys for
What
joining
up?
us tonight. It's nice to actually be able to have a two-way conversation. Usually, I'm just listening to what you guys have to say. So,
Yeah.
thank you
Same
very
here.
much.
We're chatting through the room.
Yes, awesome to have you guys on the show. I'll start with our guests on Skype. Actually, Craig, we'll start with you. We're doing a Lancero show, so we get to choose whatever Lancero we wanted to smoke. Craig, what did you reach for tonight?
I have a long-standing love for Lanceros, and so I always keep a few boxes around, and when they probably are less than 5 sticks or so, I throw them into a big assorted singles bag, and so reached into that random bag today and grabbed a Monte Cristo Especial.
Nice.
I have one of them.
I had one. I lit up one of those before the show. It was a gift, and it was plugged because I have Paul syndrome.
Oh,
That's what happens.
All you got to do there is take the wrapper off. Try to smoke it without that wrapper on there. It opens up.
But that's where you get all the flavor. I feel like I'd ruin my experience if I did that.
Oh, ruin your experience. What kind of,
Well, you're
what
like-
kind of experience you having in the ashtray?
Who says it's in the ashtray? But Craig, we'll talk about that. You've got this thing about taking apart cigars and putting them back together kind of thing. So I want to make sure we talk about that, though.
Sure, sure.
I'm not surprised to hear that recommendation. Maybe I'll try that next time. Kip, what are you smoking?
I am smoking the My Father No. 4
Nice.
Lancero,
Nice.
which I happen to appreciate very much.
Mr. Will Cooper.
in honor of tonight's show, I'm smoking the Asylum 13 99 Problems.
You got 99 problems, but a bitch ain't one.
Come on.
I
hit
mean,
me.
I think we had 99 Problems kind of kick it off tonight, but yeah.
No,
so I have, this
we
is
had
the new
way
Lancero
more.
size of the Asylum 13 blend.
I tell you
So
what,
this,
we redid the studio last Friday. We actually took everything apart and then put everything back together. There was way more than 99 problems.
yeah, I
And
bet.
the only bitch that was a problem was me.
Well, I was just going to say you got to stop quoting Jay-Z and get more on Beyonce's side.
Will, when you said in honor of tonight's show, I thought for sure you were going to tell me you had somehow finagled a Chagringo out of somebody. Oh, crickets.
Was that a-
Chigrigo.
No, but we were
Was
going to
that
talk about it.
cigars. Those were Lanceros that I had.
Was
made.
that a Lancero-sized cigar, Craig? That was the one that you blended, correct?
Yeah. Yep.
Awesome. Do you still
Yeah,
have any of
yeah.
those left? The right answer is I don't have any more, just so you know.
I have just a couple singles that I had managed to find the other day. That's
Gotcha.
all. Out of
Wow.
1,200 cigars, I think was the first run.
That's cool. Mr.
And
Mark
he,
Jr.
he paid a lot of people to take those cigars.
Yeah. Mr. Mark Jr., what are you smoking tonight?
Well, I had plans on all sorts of stuff.
You had a Lancero.
I brought like a
smor-
handful of
It was
Lanceros
a
with me today.
smorgasbord. You got some big hands, too, so it
Yeah.
was a lot of Lanceros.
It was a grip.
What
These
did
are no
you-
diva hands, by the way. This is more like the Bobby Brown hand that bitch slapped Whitney. You know that one. Listener,
I'm
Pete
glad you
came
know.
in.
I'm glad you know your pop culture. You're instilling that wisdom and knowledge on our listeners.
His 1991 pop culture.
Yes.
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, obviously.
Retro pop culture.
If I was really good, I'd remember the name of the band Bobby Brown was in, but I don't right now. Listener Pete brought in some Paul Grammarian Gourmet Series Lanceros. So since he was so generous, I figured I'd light it up.
Wow.
I lit one up as well.
Hey, Pete, how old are these?
Really old.
Yeah, they
Old.
had a number written on the box.
If he brought one in for Stogie Santa, he doesn't need it. You can send it my way.
It's unclear how old it is, but it's old.
It's delicious. The first one of these I smoked was early in the morning when they had the tent sale, and these were actually on sale. It was really good, and I tell you what, it's holding up with a glass of scotch in the evening as well. It's just full of flavor. Not disappointed in any
Nope.
way, shape, or fashion. So, what? It's not plugged, surprisingly enough. Craig and Kip, respectively, tell us a little bit about Half-Ashed and how you guys came, and the Cigar Me, and how you guys kind of came together to do all that.
Boy, it's actually, we talked a little bit, well, I had alluded to this a little bit before we started recording, but I met Kip for the first time actually at the Dogwatch Cigar Radio, 3 years ago. I had known him from Dogwatch. He was also a guest host like I was. And we met in Florida, and he said, "Oh, wow, I kind of feel like I know you. I've been watching you on Dogwatch all these years." And it was kind of a weird, creepy feeling for me because he was one of the first people to say that. And somehow I, didn't get wigged out by him, thought that, hey, maybe this guy's actually pretty cool and awful damn smart. And somehow, as Dogwatch Cigar Radio kind of came to a conclusion, we began Half-Ashed, and we worked our way here to this day now. Kip can fill in all the details. That's what he's good at.
Yeah. That was the first and only time we've actually met in person. And he's underplaying that creepy factor. I creeped the daylights out of him shortly after we started up Half-Ashed. He said he thought it was strange that we were building this show and starting this show, not even ever having met each other in person except the one time. And I said, well, I know you much more than you know me. I've been watching you for several years on Dogwatch, and he was kind of beside himself and completely creeped out for some time after that.
You know what's really creepy is when a listener comes up to you and says, "Hey, how's your dog Rocco?" And you're like, "Wait,
Yep.
I've never met you before." And they're like, "Oh, I've been listening to you for years." I'm like, "Holy crap, that's creepy."
What's really creepy to me is when they say that, and I don't have a dog named Rocco.
Yeah. So sorry guys, I'm trying to just get logged into the chat room here.
It's like multitasking.
Yeah, so I'll start with you, Craig, and then I'll move to Kip, only because that's just the way the order you guys are in the Skype window. Craig, what's your background in cigars and the cigar industry?
I really have no formal background in the industry. I mean, I think like a lot of people involved in cigar media these days, it started much more as a hobby, then lended itself to a lifestyle, and then truly a passion. I have fond memories of going on a lot of fishing trips with my old man when I was a teenager and a kid growing up, and he'd always have a cigar. And as I got older and started to appreciate more adult things, the cigars came their way to me, or came my way, I should say. And then a smoke shop opened up near my house, and I became great friends with the owner, who was just a guy who was 7 or 8 years older than I was. He was in his mid-20s, opened up a shop when I was just out of high school. And as I'm going to school and with my first full-time job, I started making some money, and cigars were where I spent it. And I'd work at his shop for free just because I liked being around it. And then from there, made my way online, and in 2001, 2002, started on some of the first-generation forums and studied my ass off, bought, encyclopedic cigar books.
I have that same book, as a matter of fact.
What'd you say?
I have that same book, as a matter of fact.
Oh, man.
It's on my coffee table at home.
It's a wealth of knowledge. I've gone through that book. I was actually thinking of sending it to Kip so he could take a look at it. It's called An Illustrated Encyclopedia of Post-Revolution Havana Cigars. And I thought, really, there's no finer resource for cigars and cigar knowledge out there that I've found. And I was going to send it to him thinking that he may enjoy some of it. And then I realized I've got marker and pencil on pretty much every single damn page talking about my experience with those cigars, or cigars that I wanted to buy, or things that I thought would be notable or interesting, whether it be jargon or ways of descriptors or different sensations with flavors. And so it just all kind of built from a passion and a love for cigars, and then taking that beyond just an appreciation and bringing it into a bit of an education. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. And I live, breathe, and eat cigars every day of my life. I love them. I love this life.
Kip, what about you?
Well, I certainly was stopped short of eating cigars, as Craig just said.
Some people do. Some people chew. Some people chew on them.
My background is strictly as consumer. For almost exactly 20 years ago, I bought my first cigar, and jumped right into it. And just maybe for 15 years, dabbled, played around, messed around. And then the past 5, it really just kind of took over as more a hobby than just a passing interest for me. And a couple of years ago, of course, I started the Cigar Me, and started posting my thoughts for whatever they're worth about cigars up, and it just kind of grew from there. And we just fell into the half-assed thing when Dog Watch was wrapping up. We just didn't want to see the community die, and just picked up the mantle there, and still keep tabs on Bob and Dale, and actually have them on occasion.
Now, a very important cigar smoking question for both of you. Can either of you blow smoke rings? It's a very important question.
I don't think I can. I don't think I've ever tried.
I can't either. Kip?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear the question.
Can you blow smoke rings?
Oh, yeah, I can.
Yeah. Oh, there goes one. It was off camera. That's okay.
I can, but never intentionally.
Yeah,
it just happens.
Exactly. It's kind of disturbing watching Craig try and do it, actually.
Yeah.
I got 2 right over my head. Never knew I could do it.
It has to be just dead calm. There's no way I could ever do it outdoors.
So it's kind of an open-ended question, but what are some of your, I guess, go-to cigars? I guess everyone has, having your favorite whatever. But what are your go-to cigars?
Following the pattern that we've used thus far, I'll head first here. I gotta say, I think my number one go-to cigar is probably the Cabaguan Maduro. Doesn't really matter the size, but that's a cigar that's just a comfort cigar. We talk a lot on our show about something to me that is, or something to both of us that is, you don't have to focus on it, but at the same time, if you do, you have just a different type of enjoyment. It doesn't matter what setting you're in, you're paying attention to it. If it's an accompaniment, or if it's just absolutely the last thing on your mind, but it's with you, you appreciate it. And that to me is the Cab Maduro.
Now, is that the regular Cabaguan, not the Guapos?
Correct, not the Guapos. If I was gonna pick something from Havana, it'd probably be Ramoniones Small Club Corona. Although they're not really available much anymore, the Petite Coronas are also that same thing for me. Just a go-to any day of the week.
Kip, what about you?
Well, for me, during those 15 years that I really just dabbled, the Don Carlos from Fuente was just number one in my book at the time, and still today is really up there near the top of the list for me. But these days, I kind of smoke a little bit of everything.
What size Don Carlos do you like the best?
I'm sorry? Which Don Carlos? The number 3.
Which size is the number 3? That's not the
It's roughly a Corona, a little bigger.
Yep.
Not quite a Corona Gorda. Love that cigar. Have the band of the thing tattooed on my arm, even.
Wow,
just
that's
for all
dedication.
those years, and I still love those cigars. And the number of them that I smoke doesn't seem to ever taper any. I just keep adding more, you know, in terms of other brands. These days, aside from that, I still smoke a lot of Fuentes, smoke a lot of Tatuajes, and golly, if you start looking at the list of my favorites, Don Pepin Garcia is heavily represented on there. You know, lately I've been digging crowned heads myself, the 4 kicks too.
Hey, Kip, you're leaving one off because you've kind of really inspired me on this brand, and that's Casa Fernandez.
Oh yeah, man, the Arsenio from Casa Fernandez is an amazing cigar.
I mean, you really got me kind of, from listening to you talk about it, you really got me going in that direction, what they're doing.
Yeah, I've said a number of times that it's tough to beat that for a $5 cigar. I mean, it's just dang near impossible to get that good a cigar for that kind of price. And you know, I really like that Reserva Maduro they put out last year at IPCPR. That was an amazing stick.
I agree.
Now, this being a Lancero show,
trying to blow smoke.
If this being a Lancero show, I want to go back to both of you about your favorite go-to cigars. Craig, have you tried the Cabaguan Lancero that was just recently released in the 10-pack?
Actually, one of my favorite cigars is the original El Triunfador Lancero, which has, at least to me, had been confirmed probably in the last year as truly being a Cabaguan Maduro blend, but in a Lancero Patola. And that, since 2009, has been a favorite. It's just not a regular staple because it wasn't around very much.
Right. Have you tried the Cabaguan Lancero in that 10-pack?
No, not in the 10-pack sampler.
Yeah. Make sure you
that's
give
on
that
the list to buy.
Yeah, I loved it. I thought it was awesome.
Don't tell me that. Now I'm going to have to buy more.
You're going to definitely have to buy it. Because, well, you only get one in the 10-pack, so you got to. Yeah, I know. It's tough. I hope he releases those. I really do. Kip, now, have you had a Don Carlos Lancero? That's a very difficult cigar to find.
I've had quite a few of them just through CFCs and last year from Vegas and whatnot.
Yeah, that's a truly special cigar.
It really is.
Yeah.
I love them. It's one of the few cigars that I willingly will pay the price for on a regular basis when I come across them.
Yep.
So what you need to know about Kip is that he plays the part of a wayward hillbilly fool, but my goodness, you know, I'm sure most of us cigar lovers that have been around have heard of Moki. You know, probably the most well-known Fuente collector, smoker, historian, representative, whatever you want to call him. I wouldn't put Kip too far below him. I think that he's got one hell of a representation of Fuente sticks, and as far as some of the more unique ones that I've ever heard of, this guy seems to have experience with them. So,
Kip, what are some of the unique Opus X cigars that you've smoked and actually enjoyed? I have mixed results there.
The ones, I'm sorry, you're breaking up a little bit on my feed. Do you ask which of the rare Opus I've enjoyed?
Correct.
It's a little bit of a peculiar question because as big a Fuente fan as I am, I'm not a huge fan of the Opus. But if you just go by the bands on them, I really dig the BBMF Maduro. And a few weeks ago, I had a couple left from CFC this year that I shared on the show, and Craig and I smoked. And we have no clue what that cigar was. I mean, it had, you know, the Destino Al Siglo band on it. It was a Perfecto shape, roughly the Hemingway Classic size and shape. And no idea what it was, but it was a fantastic cigar.
Yeah, some of the rare Fuente stuff is, it's very confusing, actually.
It really is, and it's compounded by the fact that they hold all their, details about any given blend close to the vest. They don't talk a lot about what they're doing, and it makes it tough to find out anything about it. You come across these oddballs in shops here and there, good accounts that get something special that are not expecting, and sometimes you just don't even know what they are.
In the past several years, we've seen a great increase in the number of boutique cigars, smaller manufacturers putting out lots of different lines. I think the numbers just keep growing in my assessment. Of all of the boutique cigars, which ones come to mind as ones that you find that are not, I don't want to say diamonds in the rough, but some that are your favorite of those boutique cigars coming out?
Oh, I am a Roma Craft whore. I love everything Skip Martin's putting into the market.
Good call.
Just
Good
across
call.
the board.
Have you had the Mode 5?
No, I have not.
So when I first smoked it, I wasn't too impressed. I gave it like a 5 rating. I went back and smoked one of those, and now I see what Stogasena was
Which
talking
one?
about, the Mode 5.
Which one?
It's like a
The
Perfecto.
The Aquitaine or
Aquitaine.
the Cro-Magnon?
I don't know which one he gave me.
The brown
Did
band
it have
looks
a
like
brown band or a lighter band?
It was a darker wrapper.
Yeah, now
So I think it was a Cro-Magnon.
now you're just throwing darts at the wall.
Yeah, I am. I don't know which one it was. It was whatever it was. It was awesome. It was awesome. It's the one
Brittany's throwing darts at the wall right now.
whatever he smoked on the show. It was that one.
Okay, the
Go-
Aquitaine.
It was the Aquitaine.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was just awesome. Awesome.
that's a yep.
I think the Aquitaine is my favorite of his lines, of his standard production lines.
That's
Oh, Will, you there?
what the age with those cigars age. It's gone right to the top, and I didn't get it at first. What people were saying about Aquitaine. Well, when I went back and smoked that with some age on it, they are fantastic.
Yeah, you probably remember Coop because you have the kind of mind that remembers everything. But he launched that cigar at the Chattanooga Tweet Up a couple of years ago, 2000.
I was there.
Yeah, I was too, and that was my first chance at him. And so I had a couple while I was there, but of course I was burned out from days on end of smoking 8 to 10 cigars every day. And so I just brought about 5 of them back home and just fell deeply in love and harassed a local shop into bringing them in so I could have a steady supply. I dig them.
Craig, what about you?
Oh man, it's I kind of feel like it's my bag of assorted singles. I could just reach in and grab any one and be pleased. Probably what's front of mind the most is Kip and I have recently had a conversation about the Essentia cigars, which I understand have been a bit of a topic of conversation recently. And those, to me, the original Essenzias from 2008, that's a hard cigar to beat for me. And that's a true boutique, minimal production, made just to adhere to quality, not putting out any large quantity of product. That lines up pretty damn well with me. And some of their, in fact, the Essentia Lancero, that was a limited release, is even more stunning to me. I love that cigar.
Awesome.
There's another one I'll throw in there that a lot of folks haven't even heard of, and Craig and I have disagreed in varying amounts at different times, and that's Frank Herrera's Biography. I love that cigar, and I've seen mixed reviews of it, or actually not very many reviews, but mixed comments on it, but I love it. It's a Pinar del Rio cigar. I don't smoke a lot of their offerings, but I really dig that blend.
It's a good blend. I agree. I like it as well.
It's so polarizing though. We had Frank Herrera on the show. Gosh, I'm gonna say it was probably, what do you think, 30 episodes ago? Probably episode 40 or so, Kip, somewhere in that range. And we just got into a massive conversation with him about his inspiration for that cigar, his goals for it, what it is, how it kind of turned out, and my strong opinions on it from prior to that show compared to my opinions after I heard what it was that he was doing with it. And it really was a cigar to me that it was probably a little more complex, not so much in flavors, but complex in in style. What he was trying to accomplish and how he did accomplish it, that actual finished product that you can smoke in your hand, that to me was, I needed to have that conversation and know that information before I really appreciated it. I'm not one to really love a woody profile in a cigar, but after I knew why it was and what the goals were, it worked. And I was able to get the nuance that he had intended rather than the nuance I was hoping to find. You know, kind of one of those, you know, spin you round and round, and it's not about you, it's about the cigar when you're, you know, when you're sitting down having it. I like that. I like getting knocked around a little bit by a stick.
I gotta give you guys a little promo. If folks are listening on Stogie Geeks, you need to tune in to the podcast of that Frank Herrera episode. It is some really good cigar radio, is the best way to put it. That was it was a great episode. Frank really will tell it like it is.
Now,
yes, and if you pour a little bit of rum into him, he'll tell you more than it is.
And Frank doesn't really like me, which just adds to all the more entertainment on that show. There's just so many times when he just puts in a little, and it made for a great episode. That's probably, looking back, my favorite that we've done, I think.
Yeah, it was a great episode.
Now, Craig, you've got some blending experience yourself. What can you tell us about this project I've heard about called Chagringo?
That it was horrendous for 5 years. It somehow turned into a palatable cigar, and I have little to no true skill when it comes to blending. That's the Reader's Digest version.
Okay. Go into more detail. Somewhere along the line, you got an opportunity to blend a cigar. How did that come about?
I have a pretty close friend of mine who's been in the cigar industry for 40 years, 45 years. Everything from, you know, a higher up with E.B. Brown back in the day, just after the late 70s, mid 70s reemergence of Nicaragua, potentially as a country that provides cigars to America, all the way up to owning cigar stores during the boom, to being a private manufacturer or a financier of some cigars that are on the market still today. And so I had traveled in Honduras in the late aughts with him, and went to a factory that he was involved in and just started playing, asking for, oh, hey, let's try this. I really love this tobacco, or I like this size, or what do you guys think is the highest quality tobacco you've got in right now? And I spent a week there, and it was just meant to be a sightseeing trip in the Caribbean. Well, cigar-centric, no doubt, but, you know, we spent 5 days at the factory playing around, and, you know, half an afternoon in the fields, just because walking around seeing plants is great and it's an experience, but being in a factory and actually getting your hands dirty and sticking your nose in hands of tobacco, and you know, taking hands out of a pilon and giving them to a buddy who doesn't understand how much ammonia is going to be in there, and watching him fall over backwards. It's, you know, just all the goofy things you do when you're in a factory for the first time. And so those few days of playing turned into me saying, boy, I really like this, and man, that's really amazing, and can I see this put together, and how about this vitola? And I came up with a blend that was just amazing young. Not young, fresh. For the first month, 2 months, it was spectacular. And then it turned, went sour, went sick, and was sick for about a year or so. Developed that very woody jalapeno tobacco characteristic that I don't like. Had that for a few years, and then just on half-ashed earlier in this year, I think, we smoked it again. I found a few samples, and it had completely changed. So I guess I'm good at blending, maybe, if I can take 5 years between putting it together and smoking it.
Yeah, it just takes a lot of
investors.
Just got to get a lot of capital together so you can hold inventory for 5 years, then you're good to go.
Yeah,
shouldn't be a problem.
I'm teasing. Craig's been a little modest with that cigar, and yes, it was several years on it at the point I smoked it, but I thought it was pretty dang good myself.
So what do you guys got coming up on the show?
Well, not just a whole lot.
Prepared for that. What do you got, Kip?
Well, we got or have had a little bit of a slow week or two in terms of news. You know, people
Yeah.
are starting to clam up a little bit leading into the show. And we've gone quite some time now without bringing guests on. And we got a couple of folks lined up soon. We're just a matter of scheduling and see what we can do with that this summer. But outside of that, we're just keeping on trucking.
What's your dream interview for your show?
Well, that's a good question. I don't really have. I've spent a lot of time at IPCPRs or RTDAs over the years as representatives of different organizations, mostly media outlets. And so I've talked to a lot of people. It's not so much one personality that I would really like to have, but or that I would really like to speak with. It's more just a strong personality. I like someone who's got an opinion and is willing to share them. Before we started Half-Ashed, we put together kind of a stock list of questions that I thought would be kind of a good icebreaker that we could have with any guests that come on. And one of the questions that we had put together was, what do you think is wrong with the cigar industry today? And I think the reason for that question, at least if I can, make an assumption on my own, not wanting to put words in Kip's mouth, but the intriguing part of that was I think it broke down barriers a little bit with people. It let them know that, hey, it's okay to share an opinion. We want to know really what it is you think and hope that we can get something a little bit different than, oh, this is my new cigar that's coming out. It's going to be great because it's got this tobacco in it. I think we want to get a little bit deeper, talk about cigars, obviously, but talk about cigar culture and why things are the way that they are. And if anybody's willing to open up, I think that's what will lend itself to being a great interview. For me, I want a good personality, somebody who can open up.
Yeah, and jumping off Craig's coattails there, and I'm going to take all kinds of crap for this. But I would love to get one of the Fuentes, particularly Carlito, for the very reason Craig's talking about. Carlito is very passionate. He either does something 110% or he doesn't do it at all. And that's kind of something that we can feed off of on the show when we have a guest who's passionate and not just a lump on a log. And even though I'm kind of a lump on a log at different times.
Well, that's the reason why the guests can't be a lump on a log, because that's what we usually are.
Yep, exactly.
Depends on how much bourbon we've had, I think.
Or tequila.
Or tequila. I have someone that wants to do a tequila sampling here in the studio.
I advise them not to inhale it.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Are you into tequila, Craig? I thought I remember you saying that a couple times.
Yeah, my father-in-law is just fascinated with tequila. He owns some property in Mexico, or invests in some property in Mexico where agave is grown, and he has just hundreds of bottles of tequila. And so I indulge. This is my current bottle of 1942. It's I'm not a huge drinker. I'll probably have a couple drinks a week, maybe at most. But when I do, that allows me the luxury of having what I like rather than just a drink. So if I'm going to drink tequila, I'll drink 1942 or Cabo Wabo. And if I'm going to have rum, I'm going to have Zaya. I guess maybe I do have a drinking problem because I reach
empty,
and
Craig.
can find a lot of empty bottles. And recently, I absolutely have adored Dos Madeiras, which is a spectacular sherry cask aged rum. Beautiful stuff, Spanish rum.
Nice. Transitioning from talking about rum and other things, when you think of a breakfast cigar, a morning cigar, the first cigar of the day, what do you guys reach for?
Oh, we both reach for one very
you're
similar
both the same, really?
cigar.
Similar.
Actually, the exact same cigar.
Yeah.
And I introduced Craig to this several months ago now, but it's Luis Sanchez, his La Tradición Cubana Corona. It is a phenomenal cigar. It goes great alone. It goes great with coffee. It's not overpowering. It's perfect in the morning, but still it'll still stand up to the evening or afternoon or pretty much any time.
And what was that again for our listeners?
La Tradición Cubana. It's Luis Sanchez. He's down in Miami. He has a factory in the Dominican and then a very small little shop in Miami on Calle Ocho where he sells his own wares. He doesn't sell other brands.
And there was the Corona.
Yes, specifically the Corona, but the whole lineup is good.
I agree.
Just to be aware, the Corona Vitola is actually the size of a Lonsdale.
Gotcha.
Yes,
But it is absolutely worth it. It's cedar wrapped. It has a kind of old school Cuban artwork on the band, almost a profile of maybe a turn of the century Cuban woman, and it's just a flavorful cigar, just perfect, sweet Dominican spice with earth and leather in there as well. It's just such a well-rounded cigar, but it doesn't have a lot of nicotine, and the flavors are so broad that you're able to enjoy it after a heavy meal or in the morning with a cup of coffee and nothing else. It's so versatile, so inexpensive, and so flavorful. I can't think of many cigars that are better for me.
Nice.
And I think we're going to be hearing a lot more of the name Luis Sanchez too. I mean, he's got some interesting things coming out right now. So I've had his cigars, and they're very good.
And it's not just Luis Sanchez with La Tradición Cubana, but Luis Sanchez does blending for some other brand owners. T.L. Johnson or Terry Johnson, I don't remember what's the name of his fly rod company and what's the name of his cigar company, but T.L. Johnson Cigars, I believe, is the company, and they've got a very well-known cigar called the Tempio. Those are spectacular, really, really enjoyable sticks, too, that Luis Sanchez blends.
I remember
Really
you
good
smoked
stuff.
that
I
on
guess
the
I'm a
show.
bigger
You were
fan of his
raving
stuff than I
about
would have
it.
thought.
Hey, so in terms of rare cigars, which truly rare cigar has impressed you the most?
That's an interesting question. Impressed me the most, I say on my half-assed bio that, I've probably had, I've probably had 15 perfect cigars in my life. Cigars that I just can't find anything wrong with and that I'll remember until the day I die. And one of those has definitely been a Partagas 150. I was at the Las Vegas RTDA, the last IPCPR that when it was still called RTDA. So it was probably 2006, something like that. And I was sitting at Mandalay Bay with a couple friends, and I had just lit up this Partagas 150, and it was shockingly good. And I'm not the kind of guy who shares cigars, but I made my two other buddies that were there with me try that cigar because it was that top of the line. I mean, that and one other cigar, Don Candido 500, have been the best smoking experiences of my life. Just
now, what was that? A Don Candido what?
500.
What is that? Never heard of that brand.
Alfred Dunhill, before he had the Dunhill brand cigars in the mid-'80s, he had 3 alternative cigars. You've probably heard one of the 3, I would imagine. Don Candido, Flor del Punto, or Don Alfredo. They were upper echelon premium cigars. Probably the most, before Cohiba came out and really created another higher end market price-wise, the highest end cigars out of Cuba that were available were those 3 sub-brands from Alfred Dunhill. The most widely known and the most widely produced was the Don Candido, and it was supposed to be a step above quality-wise and essentially blend-wise of the El Rey del Mundo line. It was a step above, made at the same factory, and the Don Candido 500 that I had was from the mid-'70s, and it was, I don't know if any of you guys are big wine drinkers, but if you just get a spectacular bottle of vintage wine that just has everything going for it, it's got high notes, it's got body, it's got complexity, it has a finish. That's what this cigar was like, that 500. It probably wasn't as good as the Partagas 150, but just its ability to be so head and tails above most anything else you can reach for is what was shocking to me.
And what was the age on that when you smoked it?
That was about 40 years. Maybe,
awesome.
yeah, when I smoked it, maybe 35.
Yeah, there's a lot of mixed reviews on some of those really truly vintage Cubans that get over 20 years old. Some seem to kind of go south, and other ones seem to really hold up.
Yeah, there's no doubt. There's kind of a theory or a mindset now that, um, yeah, I'll just use the term oxidation, really can damage cigars or kind of prevent them from aging as gracefully as they otherwise would have been able to. You can't take any cigar and age it for 40 years and expect spectacular results, but if the tobacco was sufficient enough and had as much, I don't know what the proper or the easy term would be, but it had the legs, let's say, to age that long. The balls, yeah. It doesn't just have to be strength; it can also be complexity and actual chemical makeup. The chain tannins in tobacco, if they're complex enough and long enough, they can break down over such a long period of time and still continue to provide flavors that the human tongue can detect. Whereas, if you have a young cigar, at times you might not be able to get much flavor out of it because those chain tannins, or those chain molecules, are too complex. You can't detect them. The opposite can be true. They can break down so far that there's nothing left to detect either. So, I'm not a chemist, but I dig and I really geek out about tobacco chemistry and biology at
awesome,
times.
dude.
It's really kind of
That's
cool.
awesome.
Yeah,
Kip,
and I
Kip,
think a lot of that is maybe not controlled, but maybe controlled. A lot of it's impacted certainly by the handling and storage of those cigars for the past few decades.
Yeah, no doubt.
Kip, what about you? Rare cigars that you've smoked that have been just truly awesome.
Oh, I have not had the privilege of having these ancient Cuban masterpieces that Craig may have come across. Most of my rare cigars have been just things I've encountered at brick and mortar shops or through trades or that kind of thing. And, I don't know of any specific quote unquote rare cigar that's just turned my world on its top. And I don't know that I have just something that stands out and says, hey, this is the greatest cigar you've ever smoked. I don't know what that is.
What about a rare cigar that's just been a complete bomb?
Definitely some of the Opus for me.
Yeah.
Like I said earlier,
Yeah.
I'm not a big fan of them, and I have tried a great number of them in all kinds of crazy sizes and shapes. And a lot of those just don't pan out. And to me, it's a glaring reason why maybe that Vitola never made it to market.
Craig, what about you?
That's a tough question. I've had a lot of cigars that I haven't enjoyed as much as I would have wanted. But I'm a really, really easy critic when it comes to that sort of a thing. I'll call a spade and say that the cigar wasn't good, but I'll take into account that things like, my makeup, my constitution might not have been what that cigar needed. If I'm going to smoke one of a rare one-off cigar, I have to take into account that it's just as likely I'm screwed up as it is the cigar wasn't spectacular. Now, if I'm going to be brutally honest, a Partagas 150. For my 30th birthday, my wife got in touch with a very good friend of mine who happened to source another one of those Partagas 150s because she knew that was the best experience, the best cigar experience I'd ever had. And that one, I just didn't have the heart to tell her was good, but it wouldn't have made a memory that lasted like the original, the first that I had,
Right. Do you guys find that, Craig? That is a fantastic point. And I've noticed that in the past couple of weeks of smoking, partly because winter's over. I've been in what I call good smoking shape, right? Like there isn't a lot of colds and stuff going around. So I've been able to smoke a lot of different cigars in the past couple of weeks. And I've gone back to some of the ones that I've smoked before. And I'm noticing a really sharp contrast between the one that I smoked a month or two ago and the one that I smoked recently. And a lot of times, it can go either way, right? Like maybe the one I smoked before was fantastic, and this one was kind of just okay. And in our rating system, some of the cigars that I smoked are a 5-er before, and now they're like a fight Chuck Norris farther, and they're like 3-4 times better. And I'm like, is that my palate? Is that the blending? A combination of both? Do you guys experience that as well?
Oh, yeah, certainly. I mean, and I think in some degree it's the cigars. It's inconsistency in the blend and the crops from year to year, and quality control series within a factory. And at other times, it is us. It's our palates. It's like Craig said, our constitution maybe just being a little bit off and not in a good condition for a cigar. If you've smoked half a dozen cigars, you're already somewhat under the influence of some nicotine build up throughout the day. It's not a good time to go get a powerhouse. You're not going to enjoy it. There's a lot of things you can work on that, certainly, and at the same time, as you smoke more and more cigars and get into that groove where your palate maybe is a little more educated or a little more experienced.
Yeah, that's a great point, Kip.
I think you'll certainly have some drift there in what your preferences are.
Yeah, I noticed it recently with that Mode 5. The first one I smoked was maybe a 5er. The second one that I smoked the other night had to be a Fight Chuck Norris. I mean, it was just fantastic.
I really think that you can train your palate too. You made mention that, now you're kind of in fighting shape. There weren't colds going around. It was good cigar season. I think that, how often you smoke cigars or what types of foods you're eating, not necessarily directly relate, as in, boy, I just had really spicy food, so I'm going to have a spicy cigar. Not so much that direct, but meaning like, I've traveled down to Central America, the Caribbean, a number of times. Enough to where I start to see a pattern that I'm down there, I know I smoke 4 or 5 cigars a day. After a week, 10 days, whatever it is, at the end of it, I know cigars and liquors and foods that normally for me might not be what I would immediately reach for are kind of what I'm conditioned to at that point. Like I've just built up, I hate to use the word a tolerance, but now what my preference is changed. It escalated a little bit. I see that much more simply in rums. Here's an example. On an average, every day, I would prefer Zaya. Once I am drinking on a more regular basis, if I'm on a weekend with buddies or if I'm smoking a lot of cigars, I might enjoy Zacapa a little more at the end of that trip and Zaya a little less. And I'm fairly certain it's because that palate has just kind of gone through either a bit of fatigue or maybe I'm trained a little more. I normally only smoke maybe 3 cigars a week, so if I bump that to 3 cigars a day, the types of cigars that I enjoy changes a little bit.
Right.
Yeah, and on I guess maybe a more long-range kind of look, I have a perfect example in my own experience. Is one of the makers I mentioned earlier, Don Pepin Garcia. The first of his cigars I had was the little Robusto My Father, #1, I think it is. It was a terrible experience. It just ate me alive, man. I had a sore throat. It was harsh to me at the time, and now I just can't get enough of those cigars. Those are standards for me. I love them, and rarely have any kind of blip on the radar as far as my enjoyment of the cigar goes.
I wanted to ask you guys along those lines about aging cigars. Do you guys age cigars? What's your strategy about aging cigars? Are there certain cigars that you found that really age well and some that do not?
Boy, that's a tough question. We've talked about, on our show, we've talked about cigars that we felt would age and then listed some reasons why we think that they would. But I think there's not so many, I don't know, I'll take a step back. I think for me, the way that I kind of put out there that I feel a cigar would age very well would be as if it tends to leave you thinking that there's more to it. A very short finish in a cigar, a very powerful or abrupt amount of flavor and complexity oftentimes leads me to think that the cigar can age more. A short finish meaning there's a lot of flavor there and then it dissipates very, very quickly. Or it cuts off, it's sharp, almost like a tannic bite. I think tannins are an easy thing for a lot of people to detect because oftentimes it comes in as a dry mouth or a sharpness, not so much sharp in flavor, but sharp as in the flavor's there, then it's gone.
Yeah, the dry mouth is bad.
Yeah, no doubt. And tannins, if you get to the molecular level, tannins will break down over time, and to the point where those tannins that dry you out in a year, in 5 years, those tannins may have broken down to where they're now revealing flavors that were there rather than a sensation that you previously were only detecting. I do age cigars. I limit oxygen. I limit opening the boxes. I try to never even open them initially, and I think that yields the best result.
Yeah.
Even heavy, like 4 mil Ziploc bags is a great solution too if you're going to age long term.
You think closing the Ziploc bags and putting them in your humidor is a good strategy for that?
Honestly, I don't really zip any of my Ziploc bags because I find that I'll get air in there, and then I can't stack them as nicely.
Yep.
So I'll just leave it open and fold it, and I can stack my cigars in my cabinet.
Yeah, I mean, they're not really completely airtight anyway, right? When
No,
you Ziploc them,
right.
yeah. So, that's a good point. I find that along those lines, talking about storing cigars, right, I like the Ziploc bags, especially for the bottoms of my humidors, which, they tend to hold more of the moisture as it falls because of gravity. If they're not in those Ziploc bags, I tend to get mold on certain cigars in the bottom, regardless of what I do. If I put them in Ziploc bags, that problem never occurs. I don't know. Did you guys talk a lot about humidors on the show? We haven't in some time.
I don't think we really do much.
I don't think we've really featured them in the sense that they turn up as a show topic or even a segment.
Right.
But we answer occasional emails and whatnot from listeners that have some kind of question about a humidor. We do that pretty frequently.
Yeah, that is true. I run out of an Avalo 5000, Avalo 2000. I don't remember what number it is, but it's an Avalo. It's about 30 inches by 30 inches by 4 feet, 5 feet, something like that.
Does that do the cooling?
Pardon me?
Does it do the temperature as well as humidity?
Yeah, it does. But
yeah, I think I have the exact same one you do.
Oh, well, there you go.
Yeah.
I bought that years and years ago, back when I lived in an apartment without air conditioning.
Yes.
So I was running my climate control as a regular for conditioning and humidifying. But now I live in the Midwest. I've got a basement. It stays pretty much right around 50% humidity all year and at about 60, 62 degrees. So I use beads in there from the humidity bead system from cigarme.com. Cigarmini, excuse me. And it yields perfect results at about 65 humidity, 62 temperature. It's perfect.
Nice. Very cool. Well, did you have questions for Craig and Kip?
Yeah, I'm going to ask one. I know because you guys, you guys of a lot of the cigar shows, you guys really have a pulse on the legislation, and you guys do a great job at informing people of that. So we all know what's going down with the FDA. Crystal ball, Kip and Craig, how do you think this thing's going to flush out with the FDA?
Well, I'll jump in there and break the pattern. I hope for the best and fear the worst, to be quite honest. It really could kind of go either way at this point, depending on what the comments are through, I think, is it July the 5th is the ending period for that, somewhere around there. And aside from the number of comments and the quality of the comments, it's really going to depend on how much somebody in power is listening. And, when I say I hope for the best and fear for the worst is a total regulation in the same sense as, just cigars, premium cigars lumped in the same category as cigarettes and whatnot. And best case, I think, is going to be that hybrid option where premium cigars have an established definition and they have some exemption from some of the requirements. At worst case, with the total regulation, you're going to see a lot of the boutique makers that we talked about just go away. There's no way they'll be able to run a business and furnish some of the even the lab work that's got to be done. I have to do a lot of lab work in my job, and I know it's outrageously expensive. And I think the best we can hope for is that hybrid with some exemptions, and I really hope if that happens, we can reach some kind of a middle ground, or have a successful agreement on what qualifies as a premium cigar, because I honestly think the $10 minimum price on that is ridiculous. The sweet spot to me for premium cigars is $6 to $9. And, $10 is a minimum price to be premium cigars. Ridiculous.
Do you think, right, along the lines, Kip, I want to ask a follow-up. Have you heard of a division right now in the cigar industry on this policy right now over the $10 thing, and how much, or have you heard of some companies possibly saying, maybe they'll accept some of the regulations while other companies are, gung-ho, no way? I mean, I'm starting to hear that. That's why.
I don't know about stories I can specifically relate here on the show. I do know some of the bigger makers, the really big box cigar makers, were not on board with the original proposed legislation that CRA's been gathering support for. They didn't want any part of it, financially or otherwise. Didn't want to be associated with it. And of course, if there's a particular cigar company or two out there and nothing they make's under $12 already, they probably are not going to be really invested in it. But some of the guys that are putting out $7 or $8 cigars are going to, it's going to be that much tougher a market for them to compete if they have to undergo the requirements and, upcharge their cigars in the process.
We've talked a little bit on our show about a divide in the cigar industry, speculating that there could be a divide in the industry for things like Drew Estate or companies that, as you say, are very heavily invested in that above $10 retail price for their typical cigar. We've talked a little bit about that and about how speculation as to what they could be thinking behind closed doors, but I'd say that that's probably made me a little subjective. That idea of suggestive thinking. We've talked about it, and so I've gone out and looked for that and tried to think about, hey, does this relate to this? Is this interview, is that postulating what we were, or I'm sorry, is that discussing what we were postulating on the show? So it's not so much that I find myself to be, hearing that through the grapevine. I've kind of looked for it a little bit and have been trying to seek it out to see if I can support my own theories. Because I think there probably is a divide that's out there, and really we're not going to see where everybody falls until July 6th.
Hey guys, are you going to stick around for the next segment?
I am. I got a backup cigar if you'll have me.
Okay.
Yep.
Kip,
Same
what about
here.
you? Okay. I got some more questions I want to ask you guys. They're silly questions. I want to defer them to the next segment. We're running a little short on time for this segment, so
Sure.
we can. I don't mean to cut you short. We can come back to the FDA stuff, but I want to take a short break right now. Come back. We're going to ask some kind of silly questions of Kip and Craig, so you don't want to miss that because it's hilarious. But we'll be right back.